Welcome to Software Engineering Daily. This is being released on Christmas Eve 2015, and in the holiday spirit of gratitude and family, this episode features my brother, Michael Rosenthal. The music from this episode is also a song that we programmed together, me and my brother, 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful of the sponsors also, Hired.com and DigitalOcean, who have made the show possible and helped liberate me from the servitude of the cubicle. I'm also grateful for the listeners and your continued support. So thanks for checking out the show. I'm just super happy to be doing this, and I hope everybody listening has a great holiday and a fantastic year. Let's get on with the show. Freelance programming is an increasingly popular career path. Michael Rosenthal travels the world working for several different employers remotely, as well as for himself. Michael, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into your freelance programming experience, but first I'd like to start with some historical context. Before you took off as a nomadic programmer traveling around the world, you had a pile of money saved up from Bitcoin mining, which you did in college. When did you start Bitcoin mining?
Well, I guess we really started doing it about a year before I left, which was, I guess I want to say mid-2013. I'm not always the best with dates.
So, and what was the state of the Bitcoin economy around that time?
So the Litecoin had it was in the middle of a giant boom. The price went from like $14 to 40 very quickly, right as we were getting our first mining rig set up. It was a very exciting time.
What are the steps to setting up a mining rig?
The first thing you got to do is find someone else who knows more about servers. It actually takes quite a bit more hardware understanding than I expected. You got to collect a bunch of random motherboards, get some GPUs that can. Well, it depends on the kind of mining you want to do. There are some specialized like Bitcoin mining machines that I think all you have to do, they're called ASICs, and all you have to do is plug them in and start them running. But what we were doing is we took motherboards and we would wire 4 GPUs to a motherboard, and there's a special distribution of Linux, and we would boot into that and connect to a mining pool, and just leave it running SSH occasionally to see if anything was wrong.
So did you have to know much about how Bitcoin mining actually works, like the mathematics of it, the vocabulary?
Nothing academic. Really what it took was for the we were about 3 people, and between us we had enough technical know-how to set up these machines and manage the configuration. So it basically takes server configuration knowledge and hardware knowledge, and that's about it.
What kinds of maintenance tasks did you have to do to like keep the rig running?
They would crash all of the time. I had an application on my phone for, like, we all had some monitoring apps, and I had a SSH app on my phone for SSHing into the machines and rebooting them whenever they would crash. Yeah, because if you let them, they'll overheat. You want to like run them so that they're near overheating, but you can't let them totally overheat, or they might explode. Yeah.
Did you worry about that? Because I mean, these were just running in like office space somewhere, right?
Well, one time we took a GPU out and it did literally explode when we were trying to debug what was going on with the machine. Like the GPU, yeah, sparks. There were actual sparks and a puff of smoke, and the GPU was broken. But most of the time we had it running in our garage. We got like a server rack. Well, once we hit, I think, 4 machines, once we had 4 motherboards and 4 GPUs per each motherboard, we got a server rack and we set it up in our garage. Uh, yeah. So the but yeah, the main thing was we just had to make sure the machines were spaced out so that if one like blew up, it wasn't going to be a large explosion, but you didn't want it to like mess with the other machines.
Okay, and so what else was going on in your life around this time when you were mining Bitcoins on the side?
So when we started, I was still going to UT Austin, and I was working as an intern for a startup in Austin. Go to class and then drive to work until maybe 6 p.m. and then go home and mess with the Bitcoin mining equipment, trying to optimize it and get it not to crash for the next day.
So, and around this time, you were going to college, but eventually you kind of realized that college wasn't suiting you. So, I'm curious about how the different events in your life that were going on around that time led you to the idea that you wanted to leave college and, just travel around the world programming.
Uh, yeah. So the traveling idea occurred quite a bit later, but let's see, I was taking a few classes, like I was taking a systems architecture class and I think it was just a straight up logic class, and and I was enjoying them, but like I I felt pretty motivated to study the same material outside of school, and I really didn't feel like I was getting that much of going to campus every day. Like lectures felt very slow. The My teachers, I didn't feel like they were that helpful. I mean, they were all right, but it just didn't feel as productive as either my time at work or my time of independent study. So eventually I decided to try just taking one class. It was a great class on uh, what was it, like the complexity theory. It's like language complexity theory, and I took one class and worked at the same time, and I decided I just really liked working more, and I really enjoyed my own method of study to that of the universities.
And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is this dichotomy between theory and practice, and particularly at UT. I think actually at most universities that teach computer science, they say we are a theory-based institution. And to this day, I don't completely understand what that means. Like, what is this aspect of computer science that you have demarcated as theory that does not fit into practice? I think basically, like, if I don't know. I mean, what's your answer to that? What are the segments of computer science that are theory that are not practice?
So I think the real defining feature in computer science is if the practitioners or the theory the person doing the theory is working with runnable code. That to me, that's the real defining factor of what is like working with theory versus what is like actual programming on a machine. And I think to say that we're focused on theory means we're not necessarily going to teach you how to run this on a machine, even though in reality, I think they can, and they should. But yeah, it's the
But I mean, that's such a weird definition, because when, for example, I took a distributed systems course, and most of the class was not doing programming. We did do some programming, we did do some practice, but a lot of the quote unquote theory was like proving that this distributed system algorithm would work. But the thing is, like, that's important for practice. Even though you're not programming, you're writing an algorithmic structure that's going to translate easily to a program, so it is still practice.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do that semantic jump if you want, but like I think there are a lot of like these kind of, they get laid out as kind of dichotomies, but they're not really dichotomies. There's always going to be a gray line between like what is theory and practice, or like what is tactics and strategy. There's always going to be a gray line.
Right.
So, and honestly, I think sometimes like when something that I really wanted out of my like computational theory class was we would deal with finite state machines and a lot of different kind of pseudo programming languages like string generators basically, and like all the time anytime I was writing on paper code, I was thinking to myself, why don't they just make a programming language for teaching this? And the thing is, there are academics and like professors who will do this. They'll make like a scheme dialect, or they will implement these highly theoretical concepts in usually a scheme or a Lisp language, and they'll give a lecture on it. But I couldn't find anywhere like a toolkit for learning computational theory with finite state machines that were actually on my machine. And yeah, so something I thought was off-putting about a lot of my academic work was like, I want to be working with my computer when I'm programming. Like, I have a really good workflow for writing code and testing it and understanding it. If I had that same workflow for theoretical concepts, which are just abstractions, just like any other programming concept, then I would learn a lot faster.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's really good reasoning. Okay, so you've explained your strong reasoning to quit college, and that makes complete sense. So at that point, you're working full time, and at what point did you like? Well, I guess so. At that point, you were working and mining bitcoins. Describe the transition where you decided to go off and travel. You said it was a long time after that, so I'm curious about the gap between when you quit school entirely and decided to go travel.
Yeah, so I was an intern when I kind of tapered off and then eventually dropped out of school, and one of my goals was to get promoted to being a full-time employee, which, quote-unquote full-time employee, I was already working full-time, but I got promoted to a data analyst position because I was doing a lot of database work and scripting with Postgres. And at that time, when I got promoted, the startup that it was a startup, and it had just gotten a new round of funding, and they were in the process of expanding. And over the course of a few months, the expansion kind of made my work environment feel quite a bit less comfortable. The general attitude around the office started to shift direction. One of the things that really started to take shape was the company moved into more of a sales oriented model, and it became a lot more draining to go to work. And the real thing that made me decide to leave the company and try something else was a good friend of mine who was also working there. He came into a dispute with the higher management, I guess a disagreement, I don't want to go into details, but he left the company. And one of the most enjoyable things for me at the time was to go on walks with him midday every day. And
Yeah.
when I didn't have that anymore, I decided maybe it's time to try something else.
Yeah. So, do you think at that time you were undervaluing yourself as an employee? Because I remember talking to you around this time and just feeling like there's no way that you are getting compensated adequately, both in terms of financially and in terms of like culturally and satisfaction and the amount of creative latitude you had at work. Like, do you think you were undervaluing yourself?
Um, I think I would say that, yeah. When I decided to leave, they offered me a position shift and a pay increase, along with some paid leave. They actually offered me a pretty nice deal, but I decided it was just time to try something else. Um, but yeah, I would say I was undervaluing myself.
Interesting. Okay. So you decided to travel at that point. What was the impetus for that?
It was so I started traveling with this same friend who left left the company basically the same time I did, and we had talked about it about a year prior, um, and I guess the main motivation for me was to gain more perspective on like the world and my place in it because I grew up in Austin. I traveled a few times. Like in high school, I did some exchange program to Japan, but I didn't really know that much about the world. I was never a very good geography student. I was never very good at remembering history, so I really didn't know like what was out there, and I decided this is a good time to find that out.
So when you disembarked, what was your plan? Did you have a plan to? I mean, you had some money saved up from Bitcoin. I don't know if you care to say how much, but I think you just basically said, okay, I'm just going to take this money and then I'm going to go travel on it and I'm going to figure out what happens next. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. So our situation was basically we had Bitcoin saved up from Bitcoin mining as well as the money that we made, some money that we made off of the mining, and just saving in general. Um, so yeah, we actually had. I'll say that we had about like $3,000 between the two of us in cash when we left. We had more than that in Bitcoin, but uh, we went maybe 6 months without. No, we went 4 months on that just 3,000 while traveling.
4 months on $3,000?
Yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah, and it wasn't like we were being particular. Like there were times where we were being pretty thrifty, but yeah. So our original plan was, uh, my friend had heard that Bulgaria is cool, so we said we're going to go to Bulgaria. We got tickets to Sofia, but we actually got off of our connecting flight in Istanbul because Istanbul looked really cool when we flew into the city.
Let's fast forward a bit because I want to talk about freelancing. And so eventually, you traveled around, you went to these various Eastern European countries, and then you wound up in Thailand. And somewhere along this time, you decided to take up freelancing. You started finding programming jobs online. When did you start doing that? Were you like really hitting the skids and like running out of money and you decided to do it, or were you just feeling inspired to do some work?
It was the former. Uh, we were in Sofia, Bulgaria, and we were starting to run low on money, and so I started applying for jobs online. I think I sent out like 10 or 15 applications a day for 4 days, 4 or 5 days, and and then we took a flight to Berlin, and Berlin was very expensive for us at the time. Uh, So I landed a job when we got into Berlin, and it was this really, uh, really odd DevOps job. With they had this what they called a bespoke CMS with that was written in TLC or uh, TCL, tool command language, which is like it's very Bash like. It's mostly like Bash.
So this was a job at an office?
No, it was on Odesk, Upwork, formerly Odesk,
Right.
and yeah, that was for like it was like my first job. I think it was like $15 an hour, and 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 I just took it because we needed money, and yeah, and yeah, we bounced around Germany, and actually we spent very little money in Germany, partially because we had very little, partially because Germans can be very friendly. They have like a really friendly culture, so they're very sharing. But yeah, so I worked as we went across Germany, and we went to Poland, and then I upgraded my job to a very satisfying front end development job uh, in Krakow, Poland, and I just hung out there for like a month working to save up money again.
This was another remote job?
Yes, all the jobs I've had in the past year and a half have been remote jobs.
How does the remote job selection or discovery process work? Like you hop on Odesk, you create, or now it's Upwork, you create your profile. What are the steps to getting a job?
Yeah, so not all clients will use Upwork, um, but yeah, I don't know. When you start out, it's a lot more difficult than it is now for me. Now I'm getting basically a job request every week that I turn down because I'm busy. But
Do you have to build up credentials, like build up hours worked on the platform?
it definitely helps. It helps a lot. The more hours they see that you've worked on Odesk, the more they trust that you know what you're doing, or that you're not just going to scam them. But yeah, so you just browse the jobs. When you get started, you have to apply to a lot to get a single offer or a single interview. Every client does it differently, but usually it's a Skype call, and if they feel comfortable with you, or if you pass some sort of code test that they have, they'll give you the job and see how it goes.
Interesting. Okay, so how do you negotiate? I mean, are you able to negotiate the price of your work, or are they generally setting the price?
I I'm always able to negotiate the price. Early on, I didn't really know this, but yeah, the when somebody's looking for you on Upwork, if they send you an invitation, then they're expecting your profile rate. Uh, do you know much about? So on Upwork, you have a profile rate that everyone can see, and you're somebody who's like inviting you to interview for a job. They're definitely going to expect that rate. And yeah, typically what I do is I'm still trying to find what is my rate, right? Because it's very hard to know what the value I'm providing really is. But I'll just, if I need, or if I feel like the work I'm doing is more valuable than what I'm getting paid, I just raise my rate some.
So yeah, it's interesting because presumably if you're getting a ton of inbound requests, then it means your rate is too low. But if you make it too high, then you get no requests, and the optimal is you just get a single request.
Yeah, kind of. You can you might be able to find some algorithm for it, but uh, yeah, it's really about like how much work you want and how much you value your time. That those are the things I try to think about the most when I'm setting my own rate.
Interesting. Have you ever taken a freelance job that you regretted?
Yes, yes, I have.
What was that?
Well, I won't go into details, but the um, it was a fixed price job, and I was they had very clear requirements, and so I was like, okay, I'll try a fixed price job. It was my first fixed price job, and uh, and I laid out milestones for them, and I said this will take this long, et cetera, et cetera. And when I get into the code that they have already, it was very disorganized, and it was really just not what I was expecting, and not what I was ready for. So it ended up taking more work than I expected. So my estimated rate for them per hour was it ended up being like I ended up working more than what I was paid to do, basically.
Did you consider just leaving the job after seeing the code base?
I honestly I didn't really consider it. It wasn't. If it had been a larger job, then I probably would have. If it had been longer than a few weeks, but uh, yeah, I didn't want to. The client also has a lot of opportunity costs that they sacrifice to go in to a contract, and you know,
Well, that's certainly true, but also if they advertise in a way that ends up confusing you and you enter into a deal where, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to be in this terrible code base for a longer period of time than I estimated, it's kind of false advertising.
yeah, that's true. If it had been a more involved contract, then I would have probably canceled it. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, in general, I try to avoid leaving contracts on a bad note because
Right.
there's some
Okay.
review system on Upwork, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to sully your name. Okay, so time is progressing. You make your way out of Eastern Europe to Thailand. What was going on at that point? How was your freelancing career evolving as you moved from Eastern Europe to Thailand?
So I had two contracts at that point, and they were both pretty hefty. One was enclosure, and that was some really enjoyable work. Uh, but yeah, I started making much more money than I needed to survive because the price of living in the rest of the world compared to the U.S. is much lower. So maybe I would spend I think my hostel in Sofia, Bulgaria was maybe $7 or $10 a night, and I would eat out for maybe $3 or $4 a meal. Um, and I was working, almost full time. So after another month in Bulgaria, I had a lot of money saved up. So when we flew to Thailand, we didn't actually really know where we wanted to go, but we decided since it was getting to be winter at that point, we decided to go to Thailand. Uh, we really wanted to go to South Korea, but South Korea gets very cold in the winter. So
Mm.
so we said Thailand. We'll go there, and then we'll keep going towards Korea once it gets warmer. But we never did. Uh, so when I got to Thailand, when we flew to Thailand, I decided to kind of wind down the contracts that I was doing and focus on some personal projects. Yeah, that's basically the best part about doing freelance work is when you don't need money, you don't want to keep working, you just you say stop. You just stop.
What kinds of personal projects did you end up working on?
I was working on a small web page for practicing Thai. It was just a typing flashcards web page, and yeah, that was all I was working on at that time, and I was just trying to learn Thai.
Okay, and so at what point did you return to freelancing?
Well, I wouldn't really say I left freelancing. I made it a smaller part of my life. I guess I started working more. At that point, I started working more because I wanted more work. Uh, yeah, I guess it would have been a month after I got to Thailand. No, 2 months after I got to Thailand, and I made a visa run to Singapore. That's when I started taking on a lot
Okay.
more work.
So you've mentioned this lifestyle arbitrage, this idea where you get to make an American salary freelancing, but you pay a cheaper cost of living. How does this affect your life more generally?
Um, Definitely positively. Uh, I mean, it means that every hour I work is just much more valuable. So, for instance, right now I'm in Armenia. I'm in Yerevan, Armenia, and they every day they have a lunch special for 1,300 Armenian dram, which is about $3, and it's a three-course meal including a drink. So if I want, I can go eat a three-course meal, like very good food, every day for just nothing compared to what it would be in the U.S. Uh,
Yeah.
so in general, it increases my quality of life just immensely. Uh, yeah, it's I'd say that's the main impact.
Is there anything that you miss out on from America? I mean, other than stuff like family, is the upper bound of food quality in America, for example, better than a place like Armenia?
I wouldn't say the upper bound on food quality. Uh, like down the street, there's a cafe with a what they call a French burger, which is like a veal, bacon, and vegetables, and it's like really really good. It's $4, but the there is an upper bound on well, it really depends on where you are in the world, but the U.S. has some very nice things, and there are some things that I miss about Austin, such as my favorite 24-hour coffee shop, Epoch. Uh, I I definitely miss that. Uh, but yeah, the main thing is just the people that I miss in the U.S.
Interesting. So eventually, you decided to shift your focus towards moving towards a consulting company. You decided you wanted to start a consulting company called Mango Chomp. What is Mango Chomp, and why did you decide to move from the world of freelancing to the world of consulting?
So the main deciding factors was I met a Thai programmer. His name is Wai Kung, and he was competent and he was undervalued in Thailand. Uh, like, and he's a he had he has more back end experience than I do, and he was getting paid, uh, not basically not enough. Uh, and
A Thai salary.
yeah, he was getting paid a Thai salary, and I told him, if you want, you can quit and we can work together, and eventually he said, yeah, I'll do that if you can get work. So we started working together, and the other factor was I met a Thai girl, uh, and she was a very good designer, and well, she was still in university and she didn't know what she was going to be doing afterwards. And so I said, you want to like do design work and we'll program. And so we just decided to form a team or agency, whatever you want to call it. The name Mango Chomp was, well, it was mainly just because I like mangoes. But, but yeah, we figured we'd either do some game. We have a game in the works, but we're also going to do mainly front end design and highly specialized marketing sites is what we want to be the focus. Obviously, that always changes when you start a company, but
why does this generate better returns than freelancing?
For me personally, I'm well, since we're still very nascent, I'm not really well. Actually, that's not true. I mean, when you organize and you have like a team that can work together, generally you can produce much better results than like a group of unaffiliated freelancers. Because, well, since I've done a lot of work with Why Now, our communication flow is just better. There are some other reasons. I guess. What do you mean specifically? Do you mean for me personally, or?
I mean, in any case, like, because freelancing is, you're just taking these one-off jobs, and then in some sense, consulting is also just taking these one-off jobs, but you've got an enterprise in front of it rather than just being a singular individual freelancer. So I was just curious about what the advantages were, but I think you defined them pretty well.
Yeah. With having an actual company, it's easier to define like an image, like you were saying. Like you have an identity as to what you are and what you specialize in, and it's easier to find work in that vein.
Seth Godin talks about the dichotomy between a freelancer and an entrepreneur. What do you think is the difference between a freelancer and an entrepreneur?
I don't really know how much of a difference there is. I mean, I think a freelancer can have an entrepreneurial spirit. I guess an entrepreneur would have to be a bit more like endeavor to be creating something. I really don't know. I don't know what I would say is the difference.
Do you see yourself creating products end to end at some point in the future?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That is generally my goal with Mango Chomp.
Oh, okay. So you see Mango Chomp as sort of short term, it's a consulting organization. Long term, it's an organization that actually makes software products.
Yeah. I mean, it could evolve in a number of ways. Like we've got a lot of talent elements going for us. But yeah, I mean, one thing I think would be really cool is if we're doing consulting like you said, and we're using our own libraries. I'm building some libraries for front end development, and as long as we have like if we're using the same kind of code, maintaining multiple clients and improving their software would be a much simpler, a much more elegant process than what I see a lot of agencies doing, which is not very elegant.
Well, tell me more about those front-end libraries. What are you building libraries for?
Yeah, so I've been working on our homepage. You've seen a lot of it. Generally, I'm using React, but what I really want to do is make it a lot easier to build like really intricate front ends. and React is great for that. I've been working on a library for doing nice, like smooth animations and stateful animations, and a few other like state control libraries. Uh, like a lot of times, there's a lot of different ways you want to interact with an element on the page, and I'm kind of trying to consolidate all of that behavior into the same structure, so that if you want to click or you want to press enter, you don't have to write like, 20, 50 lines of code for handling a single state change just because it has different controllers.
Okay, interesting. Can you talk about that in more detail? Like, what are the problems that exist in? Actually, no, it's a bad question. Okay, so you're talking about React. Let's see. Okay, so much of your programming is in React. What do you like about React so much?
Mainly the declarative nature of it, and the well, the main thing is that it's declarative, so I can take imperative code that I find elsewhere, wrap it in a React component, and add good state management to it, and then using it throughout the rest of the code base is just really straightforward. Um, the the overall structure of the code becomes like really transparent. Like you know uh, you know what structure you're going to end up with. Nothing is surprising in React to me. Um, immutability is really nice. So yeah, the less state you have in a React app, the more it becomes uh, just a description of how the page should look. Um,
Functional?
and yeah, I mean the yeah, it all goes together very nicely. But the main things are the declarative nature and the uh, the immutability aspect of props.
Okay, well, so I'd like to talk some more about just the general ethos of freelancing. If somebody is interested, like let's say somebody is in a some listener is listening and he's trapped in a corporate job and thinking about potentially doing freelancing. What advice do you have for a person that is interested in taking the steps to go from working at a large company to being a freelancer?
The easiest thing to do would just be to start building your Odesk profile or Upwork profile and find some small jobs, which goes along with maintaining a resume, even if you're still working your desk job. That's something I was pretty bad about while working in an office. But maintaining your resume, it really makes you like think about what your skills are and if they're being utilized properly or if you're underpaid. Because as you're typing your resume, you're like, yeah, I am. I'm pretty good at this stuff. Maybe I should be making more. Aside from that,
Right.
don't be afraid to quit your job if you have even like a small amount of savings, and it really doesn't take that much time to save. Plenty of money to live on. Uh, while I was working full time, I got really into buying like pretty expensive clothing, like high quality clothing from a company called J. Hilburn. They do like custom made shirts, pants, and blazers, stuff like that. And I was still saving money. I really don't know how anyone who's this is if you're like a young, a young software engineer who's making plenty of money, more money than you know what to do with. Don't try and do something with it. Just let it sit for a little while.
What's the most common language that you see freelance jobs posted in?
Python. Python is really popular. I haven't seen much Ruby. It might just be because my skills are leaning towards Python. That could easily be the case. But I've mostly seen Python. Never Python 3, always Python 2.7. I'd like to be seeing more JavaScript. I've seen some front-end JavaScript. Obviously, plenty of front-end JavaScript going around, but rarely Node.js.
What are these types of projects, these Python projects that people are posting?
They vary a lot. Oftentimes, they're front-end applications that use like Python and Django templating, and they can be small or they can be pretty large. There's one I'm working on right now is using Python Eve and Angular. It's a bit of an oddball project, but it uses like HTOS for a single web page, which is a bit strange. But and there's another that I'm working on that's just nothing but API development. So they have the client has a large network of APIs that they need maintained and developed in Python, and servers that need to be managed. So yeah, you can really see all kinds of stuff out there in the wild.
Have you ever taken a job that has technologies that you are intimidated by?
Yes. And my advice to anyone who's looking for freelance work is just don't be intimidated. In the first few weeks, maybe you have to try really hard to get up to speed on some technology. Like I was actually the front end job I mentioned earlier that I started working on in Poland. I hadn't done any front end work in a while, and I felt really intimidated by the stack they were using, which was like it uses less CSS, which is a preprocessor, and they were working on a very big website. But I just, put my face to the grindstone for like a week or two, and I felt totally comfortable in using the technologies that they had given me to work with. Yeah, it doesn't take very long for a programmer to learn a new technology. It just doesn't.
So I want to begin to close off with a bit of a philosophical discussion, because you're my brother, and it's always nice to talk philosophy with you because we have similar openness to discussing broad ideas. Do you believe that we're living in a simulation?
No. I think that we're living in. If we're in a simulation, it is indistinguishable from what I can judge to be real life. There's some philosopher who is obsessed with the idea that we're that everything is an illusion caused by the devil, and that we don't have physical forms. Everything is just an illusion. But to me, that doesn't really matter. It wouldn't matter. Everything would be the same.
How can you be sure that it doesn't matter, though?
I can't be sure, but until it presents itself to me. It was Descartes, by the way. Descartes is the guy who obsessed over.
Yeah, the shadows in the cave, right?
No, that is Plato.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was also thinking about that even before Descartes. Descartes is pretty sure he's I think, therefore I am.
Okay. What do you think programming will be like in 10 years?
Hopefully, it will be entirely different from what we do today. things should be closer to Meteor, but for all kinds of development. So, like, I was using on this earlier, actually, the basic, like the simple model for a web application that I started working with in, I think it was like 2011 when I first started doing serious web development. It was like with Java. It hasn't changed since 2011. Is you have a database and you have a logic layer that gets data from the database and then pushes it to your front end. The front end changes that, and you have this, you have the stack, right? And I was thinking about how the whole purpose, a lot of what Meteor does is just takes care of that, like takes care of this whole architecture that you had to declare the same code over and over again in each different layer, and it takes care of that. And I was thinking to myself, why didn't that happen sooner? Like, we needed that earlier. We wanted that earlier. So yeah, hopefully it'll look like we're doing a lot more with a lot less keystrokes, a lot less actual code on the page.
What are the problems that crop up when you abstract all of that away and roll it up into something like Meteor? Are there any hazards?
So, for instance, earlier I was looking at putting our Mango Chomp homepage on a Meteor server, because right now I'm using some kind of custom development server, and I really wanted better live reloading, and Meteor has really good reloading, but it was I couldn't really find a simple way to just get a static web page server for Meteor. I know that it can be done, but it felt like I was trying to force Meteor to do something that it really wasn't for, which is static web page development, which is fine, but you do kind of have a bit of a monolith. Things can become that way. Hopefully, in the future, what it will really look like is a lot of transparent, loosely coupled components in whatever system you're working in, and they're pre-configured to do things a certain way, but you can always go in and replace, plug and play, or swap out whatever different component you want. That would be a really good system. I have an idea for a application communication system, like something that kind of bothers me about programming today is my Chrome application can't talk to my terminal. It's not very, there's no really communication layer between all of the applications. So for example, it's not easy for me to set up a hotkey in Chrome that splits a window and opens a terminal, because the control structure for all of the different applications on my computer is very opaque. It's designed to be used by the human and not by the computer, or not by another program. So that's something that I would definitely like to see in general change, is to see things, see different applications better able to talk to each other and maybe be, some sort of, be able to make some sort of tool chain like we used to be able to do with Unix commands. I mean, we still can, but it would be nice if there was some sort of GUI equivalent to that interface.
Well, Michael Rosenthal, thanks for coming on to Software Engineering Daily. I look forward to seeing your future developments, and as your brother, I'm very proud of the developer who you've become.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me.